Thank you for joining I Am Possible, which is India's first future tech meets sustainability podcast. And today I'm delighted and honored to have Mr. Mario Nawfal, who is an entrepreneur, speaker, and an angel investor. He's the founder of IBC, plus the Athena group of companies, and NFT Technologies, which is focused on building the NFT and Metaverse ecosystem. So Mario, really appreciate you taking time being part of the podcast. Really awesome to have you on the show. Why don't we start with why don't we start with explaining to my audience what NFT is? Because there's a lot of haziness around it.
Yeah, I get asked this a lot. And surprisingly, even people in crypto don't properly define what NFTs are. Everyone loves to talk about NFT avatars and collectibles. That's not even the tip of the iceberg. Like, it was so early, it's concerningly scary. NFTs, non-fungible tokens, is a technology that allows you to own something on the web. That's it. So I own the phone with me now. I own the t-shirt that I'm wearing. I own the laptop that I'm using to speak to you. How do you know I own them? I don't have a certificate to prove I own them, but I own them because gravity allows me to put my phone in my pocket, allows me to put my laptop in my bag, my mic in my house, in my room. That means I own them because they're within that sphere of control, sphere of ownership, you can say. In the web, you couldn't do that. The only way you could own something in the web, if there's a central party, if there's a central entity that says you own this or you own that. Instagram saying you own this photo, YouTube saying you own this video. So with NFTs, now you've got the ability to technologically prove ownership, which means you can literally own anything on the web, from your identity to financial instruments, to in-game assets, to, of course, arts and collectibles. So that's why when I started by saying we're not even at the tip of the iceberg, because by definition, collectibles and arts is a very small piece of what we own in the physical world.
The place where it gets a little hazy is because, yes, it gives you proof of ownership. But, for example, the Beeple art, which sold for around $60 million, it is a digital file. And these digital files, nothing but down to a JPEG. And it can, yes, it gives you a proof of ownership, but millions of people can have the same thing. Yes, you can source back that, okay, this belongs to this person. In the physical world, we have, like, if we buy a collectible or an art, it's in our house, it's with us, it's not with everyone. But the blurriness or haziness comes with the same digital thing. You can make copies, and that's the reason that's confusion. But I'm sure that it will get sorted in due course of time. Would you like to explain what the metaverse is, and also this Web3, because there's such a huge hype around that?
Sure. So the initial point about anyone being able to copy it, for collectibles, anyone could copy the Mona Lisa. The Mona Lisa is in the Louvre, but anyone could have a Mona Lisa anywhere in their home because it's on Google Images, and the Louvre shows it off. Most people, there's a guy that I know. He's an Israeli billionaire. Most people would know of him. Very high profile guy, and he owns one of the biggest collections of art in the world. He has a book demonstrating his art. And I was going through that book. I can go take that to a scanner or take a photo with my phone, and I have that same piece of art in my home. I can have all his art collection in my home. So the same issue that exists on the web exists in the physical world, but on the web it's easier to copy. And it doesn't change the issue. It just makes it easier to copy. That's it. Now, when you go to other forms of ownership, like your medical records, copying someone's medical, I've got someone's university degree. If I copy that, it doesn't really help me much. Why? Because the university degree under someone else's name, and there's no value in copying someone's university degree or someone's medical records. But my own medical records or my own university degree has value because I own it. It's connected to my name, and it plays a role in my reputation and my personal brand. Now, you move on to the metaverse. The metaverse is obviously it's an overhyped, overused term, without doubt. But for me, the metaverse is the kind of the killer use case for NFTs, because great, you can own things in a digital version of things. Why is that such a big deal? Okay, it makes things more efficient, but why can't you use central entities? All right, if these central entities no longer there, or they could be more efficient, or they could be, taking a cut out of the profits by offering little value other than authenticating things, which now could be done in a decentralized way. So there wasn't a real exciting reason for decentralized ownership to exist. Some small use cases here and there, but nothing major. So then the metaverse came through. The metaverse is essentially a digital representation of the physical world we live in today. That's how I define it. So what do you do on a day-to-day basis in the physical world? You wake up, you obviously survival is one instinct. You go to the bathroom, you eat, etc. The other thing is you socialize. You might call your friend, your girlfriend, your boyfriend. Then you signal to the world a certain identity. Maybe you post something on Instagram. Then you go to work, creating value. And then you belong to a community. You might go to some event afterwards or something. So then that essentially encapsulates what you do on a day-to-day life in the physical world. If you look at our life today, all that has moved to a digital world now. When you signal to the world, as I said, you signal on Instagram. Entertainment, it's on YouTube. I forgot to mention entertainment. All these aspects, building a business, we're doing this podcast interview on Zoom. So it's already in the digital world. Already the digital world representation of the physical world, the digital representation of the physical world is already there. It's just very archaic right now. We're in the Web2 version. So the metaverse, you could say, is a more immersive way of doing this, a Web3 version of this that's always, it's going to be always running, so it'll always be there. It's a world that's going to always exist. It's persistent, that we can all operate in. Now, where it gets exciting is the decentralized aspect of it, because a digital world is great. If it's owned by Facebook, great. Same way Facebook or Meta owns Facebook.com, owns Instagram, owns WhatsApp, they can own a more immersive version of this. But now with decentralization, and Activision is a big proponent of decentralization. They want to try to build the decentralized metaverse. Now we genuinely have a digital representation of the physical world. Why? Because now you can actually own things in the digital world, as we talked about NFTs, which will be, they're like the atomic unit of the open metaverse. Now you can own your own assets and you can move them from one world to another. That means if you're in Facebook's and Meta's world, in Horizon, you've got your clothes there, you can move to another world or a game or something with those same assets. If you have a spaceship in one game, you can go that game, let's say you're bored of that game, or the game goes bust, or there's no longer too many users. You can use that spaceship and go to another game. Too early for this. That's the vision that we have in the next decade or so. But that's what the open metaverse, the decentralization allows you to do. Same way you can travel from one country to another in the physical world, in the digital world, you can move from one digital world to another.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, we're getting into very exciting space because today, if you go to see, I think we cannot do without a digital world. Or 2D screen or the World Wide Web, internet. It's the reason which has helped us spawn these billion-dollar businesses. All of those sits on the Web 2.0. Right from your Facebooks to your Ubers to Airbnb and so much. We can. Like you mentioned. We couldn't have these conversations. We already living in a digital world. And this is going to transition. And I think the underlying layer, I don't want to bring up virtual reality, but I guess, it's still in nascent stage. But I guess, once it starts getting matured, I think we'll be, yes, possibly copying a complete physical world into a digital world. Because even right now, the most basic VR experiences, this is, you don the VR headset and you get into a room, a building, you get onto an elevator, you're on the top of the elevator. I think it's called the Richie's Plank experience. And on the top of the roof, there's this plank which is sticking out, and you're supposed to walk on the plank, and before donning the headset that this is just you're sitting possibly in your room or possibly in the mall. But then as soon as you put the virtual reality headset on, you feel that you're on top of the world. It kind of plays with your motor cortex into believing that the virtual is real. And even when the content, it's plain animation. I'm excited for the world, maybe in this decade, when we can create photorealistic content, which we are doing right now. But when that kind of matures and we create this world where we have stuff like haptic feedback built in, And with those haptic feedback, we actually touch, feel the virtual world. I think then the metaverse is going to get really, really exciting. And I'm excited for this, breaking away from the 2D world, because we all the Web 2.0, it restricts us to a 2D platform. With the Web 3.0, we'll get into like the 3D world. And I don't think it'll just be I don't want to talk about virtual reality, but I think there'll be so many other layers, binding it together, creating that world. And yes, and that will be exciting, because today we can't do without the World Wide Web, and that entire business, entire opportunity is going to transition into Web 3.0. Super, super exciting. But tell me about this open and decentralized bit, because that is where I get bummed out, because all our businesses work in a centralized manner, right from banking institutions to or educational institutes to or businesses. Everything works in a centralized hierarchical manner. And here we are saying that we're building Web 3.0, which is going to be interactive, experiential, persistent. But the most important part is going to be open and decentralized. How does that work for all these centralized entities?
Yeah, I'll be very honest with you. I don't know. This is an experiment. Like anyone that pretends to know how the world will shape, how Web3 will shape the world in the next few decades, is kidding themselves. No one expected our world today when the internet was first discovered decades ago. So let's talk about decentralization in the metaverse first. The basic applications of a decentralized metaverse is essentially replicating what we have in the physical world. The glasses you're wearing, there's no centralized entity that says you own them. And I'm sure you don't have a receipt or proof that you own it unless you're extremely organized, but you most likely don't. Or let's say the t-shirt or underwear you're wearing. So in the physical world, you could do whatever you want with those glasses. You could eat them, you could burn them, you could throw them at someone, or you can use them to stab someone. You can do whatever you want. They're your glasses. That's your right. Now, in the digital world, you get assets. In a game, you get an asset. The game dictates how you can use that asset. You break certain rules, they can take that asset or your account away from you. If the game goes bust, there's people in Ukraine right now. Okay. I've got someone upstairs here in my place from Ukraine. They lost their home and everything in Ukraine. In a physical world, if something similar to the concept of war happens and a digital world collapses and we have our livelihood in that world, imagine you're stuck in that digital world and you're prevented from accessing any other aspects of that virtual metaverse, of that virtual world. Obviously it's not what we expect the world to be. Same thing here. Ukraine had war, people left the country. In the digital world, right now, you can't leave a game. The game goes bankrupt. You have millions of dollars worth of assets on there, let's say. They're all gone. So that doesn't even have to be the case. Centralization could have a solution for this. Another centralized game could allow you to incorporate assets within their game, from their game, one game to their game. But that's not how the physical world works. There's no countries that allow you to go from Ukraine to their country. Most countries are just open. You can just go out there and leave your country and go to another country. In a decentralized world, you technically cannot do that technologically. Now, I'm not saying practically. What we're going to do, how centralized we are going to be as a society is hard to determine. We're going to see how we choose the world to be. Everyone expected Web 1.0, Web 2.0 to be completely decentralized, and it led to more centralization, to more collusion and centralization of power than we've ever had. The top, FANG companies have more value than most other companies in our history, and more influence and power than any company in our history as a species. So will Web3 lead to more centralization or less centralization? First step is to allow for decentralization to exist so we can make a decision. In the physical world, we have the ability to do whatever we want. You have the ability to travel to any country you want. Now, other humans can stop you from doing that, but physically speaking, physics allow you to do that. In the digital world, that's not possible. Now you've got that ability. You've got the ability to own your assets, to move them from one place to another, to prove that you own something. What we do with this technology as a species, we're going to find out, because you're right. Like we've always operated through centralization, despite the imperfections. But, we've also seen decentralization, or at least certain aspects of decentralization, thrive. So it's kind of, it's not good to be binary in life. It's always good to find a place in the middle. But if you look at the most prosperous societies in our world today, most of them are democracies, if not all of them are democracies. Now, what level of democracy, etc.? Generally, the more centralized a country is, the less prosperous it is. But at the same time, it's not a democracy with complete freedom to do whatever you want. There's certain limitations of what you could do to allow society to function properly. What balance we find in the digital world, we just gotta wait and see.
Bang on. I mean, I'm with you on that. So tell me, I mean, sticking to this topic about decentralization, decentralization, once it kind of like really seeps in, it's going to have far-reaching impact. I mean, and the place where it's already creating disruption and a little panic is the banking and the finance industry. I think 2021, there was a report by Deloitte. It was a survey done by Deloitte. They spoke to a lot of the finance professionals. And the survey claims that cryptocurrencies or tokens would replace fiat in the next 5 to 10 years. What are your views on something like that? Is that possible? Would it be a good thing, bad thing, or neutral?
Okay, so first it's important to remember that it's humans that wrote that report. And as a species, we're not good at predicting the future. We're just not good at it. And that's outside our control. However, there's certain, history tends to repeat itself, and there's people that are pretty deep in the space, and they can look at history and try to make certain predictions. Obviously, I don't know the answer, but I do want to caution people, and I made a post about it not long ago, to again not be binary. Back in 2008, everyone was annoyed that regulators didn't do a good role in managing the financial system and controlling human greed and allowing incentives to be well aligned. That led to one of the biggest financial crises we've seen in our generation. So, if not the biggest. So back then, we were crying for regulation. We needed regulators to fix, and I agree with that. Like, we needed regulators to play a role there. In crypto, there's a lot. Whenever there's a scam, we're looking for some sort of compensation or someone to play a role, or why regulators couldn't stop that scam. However, when regulators do their job and they don't do a good job, they're far from perfect. And when there's a lot of money to be made, we start, going against regulators, like, hey, don't get involved, don't ruin things for us. I remember in 2018, everyone blamed regulators for the collapse of altcoins and the ICO hype, which is ridiculous. So that's a long way for me to say that there is a place for regulators. There is a place for certain levels of centralization. And you look in the banking sector, it's a perfect example of this. There's a great documentary on the 2008 finance, Inside Job, great documentary on the financial crisis. And that will give everyone listening an idea of the role of regulators and how messed up we are as a species. How greedy we are. We have so many imperfections in us as a species that leads me to be concerned if we live in a world that's completely decentralized and anarchy. So going to cryptocurrencies and the report by Deloitte, there are logical reasons for crypto to replace centralized currencies. The central banks, many would argue, they've got skewed incentives in some ways, and they sometimes make decisions that lead to short-term solutions, but long-term damage. And we've seen, it's hard to argue against that thought, seeing what happened over the last few years since the 2008 financial crisis. A lot of people are saying we've been putting band-aids since 2008, and eventually, it's going to backfire on us, and that could already be in progress, or could already be the process could have already started, or could be a few years away. But the advantage of having cryptocurrencies is this is one advantage. The efficiency of it, another advantage. But there are currencies in our world that are mature, that are at a level. The systems we have in the US, for example, are very mature systems, and there's still flaws in it, but it's significantly more mature than systems you have in countries like Lebanon or Venezuela or certain African countries, or I had in Zimbabwe many years ago. So what I see happening, and you kind of be in the middle, I think crypto will replace certain centralized currencies in certain countries, that are far from being as advanced as Western European currencies or the US currency. But I think it's a long way away from replacing something like the US dollar. And if it ever does replace a currency like the US dollar, will that be just an alternative to the US dollar that's more mature, that's more technological, that's partially decentralized, which was kind of the theme back in 2017, 2016? Or will it actually be a completely decentralized currency? I'm not against the concept of a completely decentralized currency. It's just going to be very interesting, a very, very fascinating experience. And you know, the smartest economists would disagree on how that could turn out. So it's an experiment. It's a scary one. It's an exciting one, but it's also going to be, you know, things. The human brain overestimates the short-term impact of an innovation and underestimates the long-term potential. I say this a lot. So I think we underestimate the impact of a decentralized cryptocurrency. And I'd be fascinated to see how that changes the way we function as a society.
Right. Yeah. So there's some exciting things, but I think what I take from you is, I think normally, I mean, the Bitcoin or the crypto maximalists, I mean, are on that side, and then there's the centralized. But I think there's always like the middle path, and I think possibly maybe that's where we'll head. But
there's a great Eddie. This is, I think you'll see my answer to almost everything be somewhere in the middle, because there's a great book that analyzed the most common factor among billionaires, and one of the most common factors among billionaires was the fact that they're not binary. They never looked at things as black and white. Decentralization is not great. It's not horrible. Centralization is not great. It's not horrible. It's always somewhere in the middle. And anyone that's on too extreme on one side to another, I try to take their feedback with a grain of salt.
When you are somewhere in the middle, life is always going to be good to you. You are co-founder for NFT Technologies. Would you like to talk about that?
Yeah, that's exciting, man. You got me so deep into the discussion that I forgot about NFT tech. So we listed on the stock market in Canada on NEO. I was in Davos, whenever Davos was, the World Economic Forum. I was speaking there when it happened. So it was a few days ago, probably like 5, 6 days ago. And today we list in Europe, in Germany, under the ticker. So our ticker is NFT. So essentially what we do is, the space is very, very complex right now. Anyone wanting to enter this space, you got experts like us, if you want to call us an expert, but people smarter than me, for example, that still disagree on a lot of aspects of the space. So if the experts are not on the same page and they still make mistakes or bad investment decisions, imagine retail investors that don't even understand what NFTs are, or how the metaverse would function, or what in-game assets are, or what play to earn, move to earn, etc. What these concepts mean. How can they deploy capital? How can they get exposure to the space? So what we did end of 2020 is we embarked on the journey, me and 2 other co-founders, Jason Coles and Wayne Lloyd. We embarked on the journey to offer exposure to retail investor while mitigating risks as much as we can, and also offer exposure to the space to institutional investors that don't even know how to add NFTs and in-game assets to their balance sheets. So what we do is we take care of the investments. We invest in the space. We usually come in very early. You know how crypto is, Eddie. You have a small circle of people, small number of VCs, very tribal. They get all the early access before projects launch on the open market, and they make most of the money. So obviously, being in the space for a long time, being the founder of IBC since 2017, we get access to all these deals. So I get access to all these deals. So NFT Tech will invest early. It also launches its own products, its own projects. So it's essentially a public company that gives exposure to investors to the space. And as a public company, we have to go through so many audits, through so many, a lot of barriers we face to make sure that we do everything above board and we mitigate our own risk as much as possible, which is kind of the opposite of crypto world. So that's the goal with NFT Tech, and it's been a great success since we launched. We listed 5 days ago. Our stock price already went up by over 100%, went up over 100% despite market conditions. So pretty happy with the work we've done now, and we're just getting started. So
lovely, super, man. We wish you and your team the very best. So
I appreciate it.
Yeah, talk a little bit about NFT technology. You said you help retail investors kind of invest and understand the space. So is it just NFTs? Is it just virtual assets, or you also invest in crypto, Web3 or Metaverse startups?
We're trying to stay focused on NFTs in the Metaverse, which I consider hand in hand, especially for me, the Metaverse. and I look at the adoption curve of the metaverse. The early adopters of the metaverse are unsurprisingly gamers. Gamers have already been living. Are you a gamer, Eddie?
No, I'm not.
Oh, okay. Neither am I. But I've talked to so many gamers to understand the way they think and how they look at the world. Now, I remember the son of one of the projects. So there's a project we've incubated called Faith Tribe. That was a project that we worked with a few months ago. We're still working with. Incredible project. They bring fashion to the metaverse. And Faith Tribe's founder, Wahid Chamas, I was talking to his son, and his son was telling me a story of how he met a girl, got into a relationship, got into a fight, and then broke. He's a kid, and then broke up with the girl, all within Roblox, all within a centralized metaverse. So I'm seeing how gamers are used to that digital world, and I'm focusing our resources right now and our attention on that space. And the assets that I'm really excited about are yield-bearing assets. Because when you look at a house, I'm in my house now. I need this house. Why? Because I'm having a podcast with you. It needs to be quiet. I need to deliver food. I need to rest. I need my privacy. I want to walk around in my underwear. I want to go to the bathroom. I have a shower. It's my private area. I want to be warm. With Dubai, it's always warm, but you get the point. These things are not, you don't need shelter. You don't need to survive in the metaverse, because the metaverse physics is replaced by code. And I'm sure we're not going to add temperatures in the metaverse, and we're not going to add, things that are just inconvenient in our physical world, but we just have to live with, we have to accept, because that's how physics are and we cannot change it. We can change that in the metaverse. So assets that make sense in the physical world don't necessarily make sense in the digital world long-term. And real estate is obviously one of them. A house for survival is not needed in the metaverse, and that's not something we're interested in. However, land that allows you to mine a certain mineral to allow you to build spaceships in a certain game makes sense, because it has utility. So yield bearing or assets with utility within games, because that's where the early adopters are, is our main focus right now. We even have our own guild, Goat Guild. And essentially a guild is a way to offer resources to players to play a game. We buy the assets, we lend it to the players, they play the game, and then we split the revenue. At least that's how the guild's starting. But I see guilds evolving into like a portal into the metaverse. Anyone entering the metaverse, they want finance, we become a financial institution. They want education to understand the metaverse, we become an educational platform. So we essentially become a bridge from the physical world to the digital world. That's what we're doing with Goat Guild. And we're focusing on gaming as the first stage of that long cycle of adoption for the open metaverse.
What are your views on India's market opportunity? Are you looking at possibly partnering or collaborating with startups or the industry over here?
Yeah, man, I was in India a month ago. You guys are insane. You guys are so crazy. Like, there's so much opportunity in India. There's so much money in India, and it's so untapped. So India to me is in like the partners that we have. I live in where I am now. We have two big places here in Dubai, in Vida Hotel. We have two big penthouses, 12 bedrooms. My whole team is here, and sometimes we share the place with another incubator called TDFi. The owner is Gaurav Dubey, and that's an Indian incubator. I went to the two weddings of his executives. Because I want more exposure to India. I want to understand the society, because first, India is an incredibly beautiful country, because I see it to be so much brain power there, but a lot of inefficiencies that are limiting India from its potential. And I think as you guys solve these inefficiencies, these systematic inefficiencies and imperfections, you guys are gonna blow up. You're already blown up. You've had your last couple of decades have been good for you, but not as good as your neighbors. So I think India's time hasn't come yet. And there's so many Indians. Like, you guys have a massive population. And some of the biggest companies, some of the best companies are led by Indians. So I'm really excited about you guys and what you guys are going to bring to the space. And you guys are obsessed with crypto. Despite your government not being very crypto friendly, you guys are just killing it.
I really hope that there is more support from the government, because they're going in the opposite direction. In fact, a couple of really great startups are moving to different countries because of the regulators or policymakers over here. I hope the stance changes, because otherwise India will end up crying, because there'll be like a huge brain drain. So Mario, really appreciate you taking time and being part of the podcast. What's the roadmap for NFT technologies, and maybe paint a picture how blockchain, Web3, and Metaverse will change the world in the next decade.
Cool. Two great questions. One of them allows me to talk about my own company, so I appreciate that. The second one allows me to talk about a space I'm really excited about and kind of sum it up. So with NFT tech, man, I'm so excited. I swear, Eddie, like since crypto and I don't know about equities, I don't care much about equities, but since crypto corrected heavily, everything is, for me, I see everything as a discount. Like you got some incredible projects that were so overvalued a few months ago. They literally dropped by 95%. I'm like, holy shit. Like they're still building. They don't care. They've raised the money. They're sitting on the money. They're still building. They have an incredible vision. And I'll talk about project Star Atlas, Seedless Heroes. These are great decentralized games, which I think will be the next killer apps of the Web3, similar to how Axie Infinity was, that are just, everyone just freaked out and just sold them. They're projects that we're invested in or working with that we're going to be tripling down on. So that's why I'm really pumped about the space. And about NFT, the first question about NFT tech is that NFT tech is, as a public company, we raise a lot of money and we've got a lot of exposure to the space. So now we're able to get more exposure when everything is undervalued. Everything's like, we went public at a perfect time, because now we can deploy the capital and start building when things are cheap, waiting for the next bull run, because you know how crypto is, pop, always up, down. For anyone listening, not watching, goes up, goes down, goes up, goes down. So every time it goes up, the people that, grabbed assets and real estate, went shopping when it went down last time, made the most money when it went up this time. And the same cycle will happen again. So that's why I'm excited about NFT tech and what we're building and the investments we're making. And we're killing it. So I'm really proud of the team there. The immersive metaverse, to me, is going to be a great addition to society. Allows us to interact with people. A lot of people in India are living outside the country, don't interact with their family. Even people within India. India is a massive country. You want to interact with loved ones that are far away. You just, it's inefficient or inconvenient to travel there, or some people just can't afford it. So an open immersive metaverse will make our society closer, in my opinion. Maybe we'll disagree. They're like, how can we be closer when everyone's sitting on their phone? Well, I'm closer to my family outside. I'm in Dubai. My family's in 2 countries, including mostly in Australia. I wouldn't be able to see them unless I get onto a 20-hour flight. Now I can video call them every day. So it gives us the opportunity to be closer as a society when it's more immersive, it's more personal. Allows us to do business in a more efficient way, as we saw during COVID. So that is a given, okay? And that's easy to understand, easy to imagine, because we've been going through that for the last few years. Where it gets really interesting is decentralization. Like, how is that experiment going to turn out? How are we as a society, as a species that did so many incredible things in our world over the last few hundred years, few thousand years, so many horrible things to our world in the last few thousand years as well. As a species that we've supported each other, we've helped each other, but we've also destroyed each other and gone into wars. Centralization is trying to limit the imperfections of us as a species. How's it gonna turn out if centralization starts to diminish? Will it diminish to a certain level where we're in the middle somewhere, where we don't have too much centralization because you remember, centralization also means humans controlling humans. Centralized entities are run by a board and investors and a CEO. Countries are run by presidents and parliaments, etc. So centralization is with people on top. Decentralization is code. Code is built by people. It's fascinating. What I hope will happen is that we will end up building good code that is not negatively impacted by our imperfections as a species, and that code doesn't take too much control of our everyday life, because then you go down a path that's entertaining more than logical to talk about, because it's too early, but allows us to operate at a level that leads to the most efficiency. Decentralization will, theoretically lead to more efficiency, but at the same time, still fulfills the reasons we have centralization. For example, greed. Still, the code allows for greed not to exist. So you see more. The shit we saw in 2008 in the 2008 financial crisis. We've seen worse things in crypto in the last decade or two. In the last decade, we've seen much worse things in crypto, just at a smaller scale because crypto's smaller. So I'd be fascinated to see how Web3 and decentralization will end up. But as I said, it is an experiment. It's a fascinating experiment. And for business people, it's an experiment that will lead to incredible business opportunities and money-making opportunities. For intellectuals, it's an experiment that allow them to see how society evolves over the next few decades. And for practitioners and everyday Joes and everyday people, it should see our society improve, hopefully for the better.
Mario, thank you for taking time and being part of the podcast, sharing your insights. Yes, like you, I'm super excited for what's going to happen when we take the path to a complete decentralized or semi-decentralized world. That this experiment, like you said, it's so awesome. The reason I get excited because throughout mankind, we've lived in a very centralized, functioning, hierarchical, top-down approach where capital was, only a few held it. Today, with the creator economy, Web3, or the decentralization, possibly it could be far distributed, and everybody could play a role in building that metaverse. And so that's exciting rather than just being like big tech or few companies. It's giving you an opportunity for anyone and everyone who's curious and has a desire and intent to be a part can play a role in building or the metaverse, as a content creator or whatever. So it's an exciting space, and that's the reason I do this podcast, so to spread this enthusiasm and the message across that there is an opportunity which is waiting. All you need to do is, be curious and be a lifelong learner. So Mario, really appreciate you taking time being part of the podcast. Wish you and your team at NFT Technologies the very best. And to my listeners, if you like what you see in here, then please press the subscribe button. And until next time, see you guys. Bye. Thank you. Thank you, Mario. Really appreciate this.